Hi, everyone. How's everyone feeling? Top of the morning to you. Yeah, so this is our 30th meeting, so congratulations. I feel like I congratulate you every time, but I mean, it's 30 meetings. I mean, for those who have been consistent, which is a lot of you, that's great. That's crazy, you know? Yeah, this is taking way longer than last year. I stretched it out just because people wanted, or I had heard that it was probably better with more time, right? So, so yeah, how are we feeling? Feeling good? Not boring yet? No.
That's why we come 30 times.
Yeah, I know.
Not more.
For me, it's definitely uphill from here on out. I love this part of the Bible, particularly once we get out of the book of Kings. We're in Samuel, then we'll be in Kings. And once we get out of that and we're in Psalms and Isaiah, we'll spend quite a few weeks in Isaiah, Daniel, Ezekiel, and then once we're done with that, we're in the New Testament, right? So again, from here on out, for me, it's an exciting time of the scriptures and studying the scriptures. So last week, what did we talk about? Yeah, lots of stuff happens in between the Sundays, so I'm sensitive that you might have forgotten, but yeah, no, last time we talked about David and his rise, really. The week prior to that, we talked about Saul. Last week we talked about David and how David was a shepherd boy and the giant slayer, right? And then the prince in the house of Saul. And we talked about all these elements in regard to how it reflects Jesus and how it reflects sort of the entire story of the Bible, what he is framing for us about who Jesus is going to be. And we're in the book of Samuel, which is, you could say, a precursor story to the book of Kings. It's about the life of David, but more so than that, it's about the rise and fall of Israel's Messiah. What do I mean by that? Or what does Mashiach mean? Anointed one, right? So Mashiach is the Hebrew word. We transliterate that into Messiah. I've said this multiple times, but in case you forgot, it's the word for anointed one, right? And if you're an anointed one, that means that you are the king of Israel. You're the king over the people of God. And so with that being said, you have so many anointed ones in the story of the Bible, starting with King Saul, then going to King David and into King David's, lineage, the sons of David. The point here is that when we are talking about the kings of Israel, we're talking about the anointed one. To be an anointed one is to be picked by God, to be chosen by God as the leader of Israel, as God's representative to the people. God was supposed to be king, so now Israel has a human king, and the king is supposed to judge according to God's will. The king is supposed to judge according to God's law. And in this case, we have the rise and fall of the kings. There's no king of Israel that doesn't do wrong at some point and go wayward at some point. As I said last time, even if you have good kings like Hezekiah or David himself, these sort of ideal kings, they still have major failings. And so when you have the anointed ones, you have these people that it seems like, okay, the snake crusher, the serpent crusher, the one who is going to save the people or deliver the people from whatever calamities might befall them in the name of Yahweh, their God. The king, the anointed one, is a failure. And therefore, Israel writ large is a failure, right? And this is the story of the Old Testament and the story of the kings. When we get into the book of Kings, it's going to be that downward spiral again and again, where you have, starting with Solomon, really, kings that become completely idolatrous, wayward. And what do I mean by that? By that idolatrous meaning, they prioritize their getting along with the world over their identity, their core identity as the people of Israel, the people of God, right? So an example of that is going to be Solomon, who secures all these, these alliances through his marriages, and in those alliances, he begins to have thousands and thousands of gods, right? He brings in all of this idolatry. It ultimately leads to just what we would think of as a national apostasy, a national breaking away from the culture and the identity that was formed at Mount Sinai, the covenant, right? So God brought the people of Israel out of slavery at Sinai, and he established a covenant with them. The story of the Old Testament is, will Israel keep the covenant? They, of course, don't keep the covenant. They get sent into exile. I've repetitively gone over this, okay? But I'm trying to sort of drill into your brains the architecture of the Old Testament. It's about people being called out from the wilderness, being established as a kingdom of priests, and them failing and being sent back out of their promised land. And in need of, what they're in need of is they're in need of a righteous king. That is the point. They're in need of a righteous king, okay? And this is what makes the New Testament the answer to the question of the Old Testament, right? The point is, when you get to the New Testament, the righteous king has come. That's the season of Advent, right? The anticipation of the coming king. So when we're in 1st and 2nd Samuel, the book of the Kings, that's the underlying meta story or the meta theme of the story is, will there be a righteous king in Israel? And the end point of the Kings is the exile. It starts idealistic, though. It starts with King David. And we talked last week about the introduction of David. King David is a figure who, for much of his life, is presented idealistically. What do I mean by that? I mean that he's presented in such a way that he becomes emblematic of the ideal king, of the righteous king. Of course, he's only human, so he will fail and fail majorly. He's sort of he plants the seeds for Israel's mega failures. But before that, he's sort of the model of sort of a personal walk with God. You know what I mean? Like a consistent life of integrity up to a certain point, right? He's kind of the model of that. And I said last week about David as being probably the main human figure of the Old Testament. I would say his life is very detailed. We have, like I said, from adolescence to his death, we have details on his life. And we have, many of his personal prayers and poems that we can actually read for ourselves. We can really get to know David in ways like we can really get to know Paul in the New Testament by reading a lot of his letters and, diving deep in the way that we can really try, do our best to get to know Jesus, in the Gospels, right? Even though he is sort of kind of enigmatic, a little mysterious, but, he being the incarnate God, right? I guess my point here is, in our relationship to the characters of the scriptures, or the figures of the Bible, David is a really, really intimate character that we can get to know. And with that being said, David, he has eras of his life, and I said this last time. Right now, we're sort of in that second era. Or third era, actually. He was a shepherd boy in the hills of Bethlehem, in the hills of the Judean country. And then he was a prince or a leader within Saul's household, within Saul's army. He was the commander of 1,000 men, right? This is after he killed Goliath. So he spends many years as a shepherd boy, many years under the service of the king. And now we're in that third era where he has been found out as someone who Saul thinks is going to try to usurp his throne, right? That Saul thinks David is trying to take me out. He has colluded with Samuel and become a new anointed one, and there's going to be a coup forming here in Israel. Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry to interject.
That's fine.
You were saying about that we have psalms and songs and poems. I just wanted to say that I used to read a psalm every day.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, there's 150 psalms. You go through the psalms about 2.5 times a year.
Right.
I did that for years. And one day, as I was reading it, I realized this is a David psalm. Because about half the psalms are David.
Right.
And I thought, how do I know that? Without looking at the,
at the header.
Introduction kind of thing. And what I realized is I'm starting to recognize his voice.
Yeah. Right.
And so a little light went on. I thought, because I was also reading the Gospels,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought, the more I read what Jesus says,
Mm-hmm.
the more I'll recognize his voice.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just one of those things that the Holy Spirit kind of
that's good.
reminded me of. So this is one of the values of spending time, I think, in the Word is you start to hear, you can distinguish the voices, I guess.
Yeah, that's good.
So just want to encourage people to do that.
You reminded me of why I said that. So thank you for that. Yep.
So you said Prince.
Yeah.
That was meaning that he was a military leader?
Yeah, so prince in the ancient usage of that term, or what translates as, a military leader and an authority figure within, an honorable authority figure within a monarchical house. And also he does become, in a sense, an heir to the throne, even in that sense, the throne of Saul, because he marries Saul's daughter. Right, so he becomes married into the already established monarchy, right? And again, there's sort of a question: is this how David becomes king? He's the anointed one. He probably thought that himself. He thought, Samuel anointed me to become king of Israel, and now I've married the princess, so that's how I'm going to be king, right? But that's not how it works. Saul doesn't like David, and he's not going to let David become king in any respect. He has his sons Jonathan and Ishbaal and things like that. So he's not going to, that's just not how it works, right? Anyway, so that's what I meant by Prince of Israel. He's the leader of 1,000 men, and he goes out and fights Saul's battles for him. What I was going to say about David, though, is whenever later prophets in the Old Testament are thinking about this one who's coming, who is, we can look forward to as being our ultimate deliverer, as one who's going to bring about a new creation, who's going to bring about world peace, right? Who's going to establish a kingdom that is of all nations. They're always saying that he is a son of David, right? That he is one who comes from the house of David. And again, we're going to get into that next week. So make sure that you're here next week. Well, sorry, Hannah. When we talk about uh the Davidic covenant, okay? So anyway, we're going to talk about the promise made to David that his lineage will have no end, and that his kingdom, the kingdom that David establishes, is going to be a kingdom that lasts for all time. Right, for all time. So also think about that. I'm sort of jumping around a little bit. The kingdom that begins with David is the kingdom that you're a part of. On a spiritual level, it's an eternal kingdom, right? This kingdom that is, restored, you could say, by Jesus, is David's kingdom. Okay, when we're thinking about sort of the monarchy of David, we're thinking about the fact that we have a king. We have a king in the house of David. His name is Jesus, right? So this can be really forefronted in your mind as something very, very substantial and real. That you belong to maybe this is sort of not the right way of putting it, but I'll just try it. You belong to a political body, political organization that has lasted for 3,000 years, right? Just think about that for a second. And if you're doubting what I'm saying here, why are you all here in the first place? We're all gathered, aren't we? We all call ourselves citizens of the kingdom, right? So you're citizens of the United States, but that's a temporary thing, right? You're citizens of a kingdom that was promised to David by God.
God believes in big government, by the way.
Sure. Yeah, the increase of his government. Yeah, that's actually that's a good comment. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, that's interesting. But it's poignant to think about it that way, to think about David as the founder of this kingdom, right? Yeah, the Davidic kingdom that we belong to. Pretty cool. Okay. David has these eras the transition between shepherd boy and Prince of Israel is when he slays Goliath. And remember, that was a typology. That was a pattern of the humble one who goes out and on behalf of the people slays Israel's great enemy, right? You can think of Jesus, the humble carpenter, the humble person who goes out and destroys the enemies of God in sort of this sacrificial manner, right? Crushing the head of Goliath. And we'll talk more about that today because it's going to be relevant. And then, like I said, you asked, about him being a prince of Israel. Well, he was married into the house and he was friends with Prince Jonathan, great friends with Prince Jonathan, if you guys remember. So much so that Michal, the wife of David, and Jonathan, the oath brother of David, they prefer David over their own father, right? That they side with David and they help him escape into the wilderness. And so now today we're going to go over 3 stories in this rest of 1 Samuel. There's a lot of stories that we're passing up. We just don't really have time to get into them. So we're going to talk through 3 stories just so you sort of get a taste of David's time in the wilderness. But you can go and check out more of these stories yourself about David in the wilderness and Saul. And by the way, just for your information, not every story about David is found in the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel. Where else are stories of David found? No, because at that time, David would have passed already, and that continues in history. I'm thinking of, Well, yeah, okay, Psalms is talking about his introspection, but yes, the book of Chronicles has some extra stories of David, so if you're ever curious, it's always a question of how certain stories of Chronicles fit into, they sort of link up with stories in 1st and 2nd Samuel. Anyway, just thought you'd be interested to hear that. Okay, so we're talking through a couple different stories today during David's time on the run, which is going to be a long time. And so I hope you guys are ready to get into these stories. Let's open up to 1 Samuel chapter 21. And I'll just tell you, these are the 3 stories. So hold me to it if we don't get through these 3 stories, hopefully I don't forget. David visiting the priests. So David, first order of business is he's going to visit some priests when he's on the run. Second story, this dramatic encounter between David and Saul in this cave system in the wilderness and what happens there. And then the last story is not about David. It's just about Saul and Saul's downfall when he visits a necromancer. Okay. And that's going to make for some really good conversation, I'm sure. So yeah, 1 Samuel chapter 21, picking up at verse 1. And we'll go to verse 9. You guys ready? Okay. So this is again right after David flees from Saul officially. It says, David went to the town of Nob to see Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he saw him. Why are you alone? He asked. Why is no one with you? Verse 2, the king sent me on a private matter, David said. He told me not to tell anyone why I am here. I have told my men where to meet me later. Now, what is there to eat? Give me 5 loaves of bread or anything else that you have. We don't have any regular bread, the priest replied, but there is holy bread, which you can have if your young men have not slept with any women recently. Don't worry, David replied. I will never allow my men to be with women when we are on a campaign. And since they stay clean, even on ordinary trips, how much more on this one? Since there was no other food available, the priest gave him the holy bread, the bread of the presence, which was placed before Yahweh in the tabernacle. It had just been replaced that day with fresh bread. Okay, pause there. Just to give you guys some context, or let me ask you this first. Any questions jumping out to you about those verses that we just read?
What's the difference between regular bread and holy bread?
What is the difference? Yeah, the great question. So if you go back to look at the recordings of our meetings on the tabernacle and the construction of the tabernacle is sacred space. It's the point of the tabernacle is that this is the dwelling space of God, and it represents God's dwelling in heaven, right? And so what the priests are doing when they minister in the tabernacle is they're entering into the presence of God, which represents, number one, the Garden of Eden. Okay, so that holy place that has three things. It has the altar of incense, which billows, sweet smelling aromatics constantly, right? Then it has a table with showbread, with holy bread, which is supposed to be eaten by the priests in the tabernacle. And then it has the menorah, the 7 golden lampstands, right, which represents the tree of life. So it's like the Garden of Eden. There's also cherubim embroidered on the walls of the tabernacle, again symbolizing once you enter into the space, this is the space guarded by the cherubim, right? So the bread is supposed to be ritually eaten by priests only. It belongs to priests, and it's for priests, according to the law of the Levites found in the book of Leviticus, right? So that's a good question. What is the difference? It's just simply been ritualistically, sorry, I said that wrong. It's set apart as sacred, okay? Sanctified or consecrated is another word for it, okay? According to sort of the law of Moses and the law of the Sinai covenant. All of the rules that were established in the book of Leviticus as handed down by Moses about sort of the tabernacle. So good question. That's a question that's important for the context of this story, or what's going on in this story, for David to be eating the priestly bread.
Is it going to go back to the story where Jesus talks about David eating the bread?
Well, we weren't going to jump to it, but that is a good tie. So who knows what he's talking about? That's a good question. Yeah, or that's a good point that you're making there, right? Other people raise their hand. Yep.
So what does the 12 loaves mean? Is it representing the tribes?
Sure. Yeah, you could say that. 12 being a number of the tribes, so maybe a loaf for each tribe. The point here is, again, when you're a priest eating the bread in the tabernacle, it represents you on behalf of a priest is a representative on behalf of the people entered into God's presence. And so for you to eat the bread of the presence, it is God's sustaining life that is given to you through the bread, right? That represents the bread of life that you are eating within the garden space, okay? That you were being sustained in the garden space. We had you and then you. You raised your hand? Oh, no, you didn't? Okay, sorry.
This is dumb, but and not symbolic at all.
Okay.
But maybe. So he says, "Why are you alone?"
Mm-hmm.
But then he said, "My men."
Sure.
I'm really confused about that. And I thought David went alone.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point. So let's go back up. David went from to the town of Nob to see Ahimelech, the priest, and then he said, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" And then let's see. I've told my men where to meet me later. So the point is, I need food for me and my men. I've come. No, that's okay. I've come as
He's asking for food for them when he sees them.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's okay. No, it's important to catch the details so that you are framed. Jasper, you had something?
Oh, no, I just something popped up. You were saying the bread symbolizes vision.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in the garden in particular. Again, it's meant, think about this. When you're a priest, you're allowed to enter into the presence. You're allowed to enter into the holy place, and there you find the bread to eat on behalf of the people. David, though, is eating the bread, right? And the people aligned with David are eating the bread. So there's something different about David that is sort of allowing for this for some reason. The writer doesn't really have a comment on whether or not this is good or bad. It's an interesting thought. Just a note in case you caught it and were wondering, why does it matter if they've slept with women recently? Anyone know the answer to that question?
Is it a breaking of the commandment?
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, it's another thing having to do with the law of the Levites, right? That to be consecrated is, yeah.
That says women. Now, what does that mean? Is that they're not married? All of them, are they? Is that what it means?
Even if you were married, you could still consecrate yourself by abstaining for a time. So just, yeah, ritual cleanliness. Without getting too vulgar in the details, it's about ejection of bodily emissions. So which have to do with a variety of things in Old Testament Levitical law. But that's sort of the key of it, is that if you're a man of war, right? If you go out before a battle, or if you're doing something having to do with sort of the sacred Levitical laws, you don't, you don't. Yes.
Don't think, I mean, kind of, you had sports too, right?
I was going to bring that up. Yeah. So there's a tradition. I don't know where the tradition comes from, of boxers, right? Who will not, they will abstain before a big fight or something. I don't know why they do that. But the point is I just wanted to clear that up for you guys. And so the idea of warriors who are consecrated before a battle, they have not interacted, they're set apart before the god symbolically in that way. And that's important for you guys to know, just because the reason I brought that up or I wanted to clarify that, is because number one, you're like, that's confusing, if you took note of it, but also that will be a symbol of the church later on, particularly in the book of Revelation. So
This happened in Joshua too before they crossed the Jordan.
yeah, it happened before Moses goes up to the mountain too. Yeah. The point here is to finally clear it up for you, and then we'll move on, just because so we don't stick on it too long. To be consecrated or set apart as holy, sort of the normal operations of your life are sort of halted, and you are now entering into a mode of existence that is not common, if that makes sense. That's probably the best way that I could say it. So like let's say on the flip side for the female, if she's been bleeding from her natural cycle, then she's no longer consecrated as holy. She has to go under some purity rituals in order to be reconsecrated, right? What is that, or why is that the case? It's because the cycle, I mean, it's in the word. It represents sort of the normal cycle of time, whereas to be set apart as holy, it goes into another mode of being that is not common. It's not part of sort of the normal operations of daily living, right? And especially bleeding or any sort of bodily emission has to do with you sort of losing something about yourself, right? Whereas to be set apart, to be holy like God is holy, you are sort of retaining all of yourself, if that makes sense. So that's another way of thinking about it. But
And what you just said a minute ago too was that this is you're setting yourself apart.
Mhm.
That if you look at sexual practices, I mean, it's like one of the highest forms of intimacy that you can have. So you prepare yourself for intimacy with God.
Absolutely.
Not
You said what I was thinking I might get at, so that's good. Yeah, thank you for just clearing that up. That's what I was hoping to communicate as well. Yeah. Again, the reason I took the time to go over that is just because there's symbolic language in the New Testament about us being as consecrated in this way. You know what I mean? How the 144,000 standing on Mount Zion at the end of time have not defiled themselves with women, right? It's a symbol of them being warriors ready for the day of battle or something like that. Okay, cool. I just wanted to go over that, but let's go back to the bread. That was an aside. That was a sidebar. Now let's go back to the bread. So it's really significant that David is eating and his men are eating this priestly bread. Remember, itself is consecrated bread. It's not just any old bread. It's bread of the presence. And David is going to be able to use this as his sustenance during this time of him being exiled, right? Now, is there other times in Scripture where David is somehow connected to the priests or to the order of priests or an order of priests? If you guys remember. Huh? Okay, so you could say David, like Samuel is part of the priests, even though he's not a Levite, but he grew up in the tabernacle, and so he's anointed by Samuel. Okay, sure. Samuel the prophet. Anywhere else? Yeah, how is David connected to the priesthood? So there's going to be a couple different times where for some reason the Bible will not, the biblical author will not communicate to you why, but for some reason David shows up as though he is a priest to something. Okay? And the primary example of that we're going to be talking about next week is when he founds Jerusalem and he brings the Ark of the Covenant into the city. it says he wears a priestly garment, okay, as he's bringing in the Ark of the Covenant into the city of Jerusalem. So the priests are the people of Levi, the tribe of Levi, the Levites, right? That's the priestly nation. But David is appearing to also be somewhat of a priest. And like the priests, he's eating the priestly showbread. And at another time, he's going to wear the priestly garment of the ephod. What does that connect to? Why is David doing that?
It's prophetic.
It's prophetic, okay? In what way?
Jesus is king, priest, and prophet.
Okay, there you go. Very excellent. Yeah. So Jesus as the true high priest. Yep.
He also wore it to it's prophetic, so he could get guidance from God.
Okay, yes, he does that in the sense that he is the anointed one in direct communication, and so he uses the Urim and Thummim or whatever it's called. I forget how to pronounce it, but huh?
And I was just asking, how do you pronounce that?
I have no idea. Thummim?
Apparently not.
It's Urim, sorry, and then Thummim, I think. I don't know, something like that. Something like that. Anyway.
The other thing, it's a foreshadowing of that the priest is not limited to priests.
Okay.
That we all become,
Yeah, kingdom of priests, a true kingdom of priests. Yeah. Yeah, he establishes a kingdom.
pre-Eucharist.
Kingdom. Yeah, yep. Does anyone think of I think of David saying, and we'll look at this today, you prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies, right? So the idea that he is going to be provided for miraculously, right? Again, the idea is that this is the holy bread, like the manna, right? That David is on the run. He's going to be down and out, but God is going to be giving of special holy, sustenance to David while he is out. Yep.
Is this taking place in the holy place? Or
It's a good question. So it possibly is taking place in the holy place, which, again, just begs, your thought of, did he just like peek into the curtain?
are they allowed in the holy place
So
other than Levites?
here's the other thing. Yeah, the Levites are. Yeah.
Yeah, I know them, but
Yeah.
anybody else? Or is that
Frankly, I don't think so. I'm pretty sure not. So that's another thing. There's a psalm where David says, I beheld your glory in your sanctuary. So why is David saying that? Why is David saying, I beheld your glory in the sanctuary, which is the tabernacle, if he had not been there? So
Get be outside on the court?
sure, he could be. He could be in the court. People, they're allowed in the court. But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is this blurring of the lines when it comes to David in particular is prophetic in that David is not a Levite. He's a man of Judah, and he's the king, but he is going to be the king priest. He's going to take on this role of priest, particularly when he is entering into the city of David, his, Jerusalem. And this is important when we talk about, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. So David seems to think that his priesthood and the priesthood of his son is of this really, really ancient priesthood, the priesthood that blessed Abraham in the first place. So with all that being said, we're going to get just sort of bookmark in your brain this showbread story for next week when we're going to talk a lot about Melchizedek and the ephod and the Ark of the Covenant and David's association with all these things. And again, the idea is Jesus as king, priest, and prophet, as you said. The triple role of Jesus, which is so important because David is also a prophet too. So you could say David is a king, priest, and prophet, So that's what makes Jesus, the son, it's so important that Jesus is the son of David. You would say the first king, priest, prophet is David. Cool?
I think John 6, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part of me.
Mm-hmm.
This is basically, we're being invited.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And this is like, it was so offensive.
Being invited into like the priestly space, you mean? To eat the bread?
Yeah.
To eat the holy bread? Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Whenever you think of bread in the Old Testament, you should be, holy bread like this or manna or things like that. You should be thinking about communion, the communion elements, things like that. What they represent consuming Christ, consuming the life and provision of God. And many times the Bible will mention bread and wine next to each other, not just in the, in the story of Melchizedek, it mentions bread and wine. So, for what it's worth.
About that little wafer.
I know.
I think the bread of presence.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I love it. Okay, let's continue, guys. Verse 7. Now Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief herdman, was there that day, having been detained before Yahweh. Kind of a mysterious comment, which the Bible gives no clue as to what that means, being detained before Yahweh. David asked Ahimelech, "Do you have a spear or sword?" The king's business was so urgent that I didn't have time to grab a weapon. Before I move on, I just think it's interesting that verse 7 brings in Doeg, because that's not going to be relevant until the next chapter, per se. So we'll get into that briefly, but we'll continue. So David asks for a sword. "Do you have a sword?" And verse 9, "I only have the sword of Goliath the Philistine, who you killed in the valley of Elah," the priest replied. "It is wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. Take that if you want it, for there is nothing else here." "There is nothing like it," David replied. "Give it to me." And we'll pause there for this chapter. Really, really interesting. Again, a lot of assumed knowledge going on here. So number one, again, what is Doeg doing there? We're going to get into that in the next chapter. But David's asking for a sword, and we have only one sword here. We're the priests, but we have the sword of the giant that you slayed. Hey, it's here hanging out with the ephod. It's like, what is going on? So let's go back and think about the sword of Goliath to begin with, just as a thing. It's the sword of a giant, right? It belonged to him. It was fastened to his belt, theoretically, right? To this enemy Philistine. So it's an unholy thing. It's an unclean thing. It's a sword of the enemy. Huh? Yeah.
And I mean, it does say he killed him.
He killed him with a sword. Yeah, he killed him with the sword. Yeah. That's a good comment. Yeah, but I guess I'm just saying it's interesting. Why is this external non-Levitical thing being brought in among the priestly elements? Really interesting. And then, why is David allowed to keep it? Well, he's asking for a sword, and it's the only one there, so there's the pragmaticness of it. But you could say God, in a roundabout way, is giving David the sword of his enemy that he used to strike him down. We're talking about the sword of Goliath, and it's sort of a mystery as to why it enters back into the story. But theoretically, this is going to be David's sword, right? I mean, it's like this is his sword that he's going to run around with for a while. The sword of David, sword of Goliath becomes the sword of David. So go ahead.
The reason I'm asking that is because usually when God use or when they go into battle, they're not allowed to keep anything unclean.
That's sort of what I was trying to get at.
So that's the reason I'm asking, because I'm thinking about what you're teaching us, and I'm like, well, why would David take, even after he killed him, he took it with him,
Right.
and put it in his room, and I'm like, well, usually God tell him, don't take nothing.
Sure.
You store everything.
And how did it end up in the city of Nob with the priests is a really interesting question. Primary thought that you can have is God is providing a reminder, right? It's been a long time since Goliath has been killed. But God is providing a reminder for David, a memory. Look at what victory I secured for you in the past. You're about to enter into a very hard season. Here is the souvenir of your past, an heirloom of your past victories in me, your great strength and faith, strength of faith to trust in me. Trust in me now as you will carry the sword of Goliath into your time in the wilderness, right? Yep.
I'm going to sound dumb again.
No.
Is there any like possibility that the priests like saw this, like they consecrated?
They could.
Like this was what this is a symbolic,
They could sanctify it. I think so.
and that it became that.
Yeah, it could. We're gonna keep that in mind. Keep that in mind.
Well, I like the movies, but like thinking of Lord of the Rings and how they kept the, you know what I mean, and they reforge it. Like it's a
Yeah.
symbol of
Renewal.
future victory.
Yeah.
And all those things.
Let me summarize, and then we'll continue talking. So while fleeing Saul's agents, David hides in the priestly city of Nob. There, David will eat the priestly bread of the presence and take up the sword of Goliath, which he originally used to cut off Goliath's own head. From here, David is sent on his way to live hidden in the wilderness and amongst the Philistine peoples. So yeah, we're talking about the sword of Goliath. What is the significance of David's use of Goliath's sword? So yeah, it's something unclean and of the nations. The great bane of Israel, right? The great bane of Israel has been sanctified and is in the holy place amongst the priestly elements, amongst the bread of the presence, right? Think about symbols and think about patterns and think about Jesus here. How does this connect to Jesus?
Takes the unclean and makes it clean.
Takes the unclean and makes it clean. Very good. Right. So the unclean doesn't pollute the clean. The unclean is made clean by the clean. Yeah, that's good.
He talks to, was it Peter?
Mhm.
Chapters in Peter was like everything was unclean, had that dream.
Okay. Yeah. Do not call unclean what I have made clean. Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Think about just think about the concept of David using Goliath's sword. Let's call it the bane of Israel. Using Goliath's sword to achieve the victory.
An instrument of death.
The instrument of death. Yes. So what do you see when you see this image?
We see our salvation, righteousness, but they see an electric chair or a.
Yes. So when you're Mary and John and Mary Magdalene standing and beholding the crucifixion of Jesus, or let's take it even further back. Let's say you're walking on the road, you're an ancient Roman, and you're walking on the Appian Way, and there's 200 criminals lined up across the Appian Way as you walk down with their bodies plastered on, nailed to boards of wood. What do you think of? Do you think of the light of the world, the great salvation, right? The great salvation of humanity. No, you think the power and might of Rome to smite and kill whoever it pleases, to nail people to boards of wood in public spectacle. And that is somehow used that now, if anyone sees this, they're not thinking about Roman torture devices, right? Of execution. They're thinking about the salvation of the world, according to the Christians, right? So David uses the weapon of the enemy to secure the victory. And it becomes his standard, right? It becomes his banner. It becomes the thing that he's going to carry with him into the wilderness, right? As the reminder, as the sign of the victory of the past, the deliverance of God in the past, now in the present. The weapon of the enemy, which is the sign of victory. Are you guys following me there?
Have you ever seen that as his cross flanked by Arthur?
Yes. Yeah. Well, sheep and goats cross because you have the thief on the right and the thief on the left, right? Yeah. So hopefully you don't think that's a stretch. I didn't make that up.
Oh, that's great.
Sure.
Shadows.
Sure.
What we're saying about taking the reminder of God's spirit is with you.
Yeah.
It's like when you talk.
That's cool. That's a really cool thought. When you think about David taking the sword of Goliath and the sword of Goliath being this special thing, this thing that has somehow been consecrated, made holy, this terrible thing, right? The sword of this giant. Remember, the giants are emblematic of the greatest evil of the Bible, right? The founders of the kings of the world, or kingdoms of the world, the founders of the evilness of the world. And he takes his sword and makes it his own and secures the victory. Now, again, 2,000 or 1,000 years later, his descendant will do the same thing, right? But on a much greater scale, making the cross ubiquitous with the people of God. Yeah, we're all wearing crosses here and there, right? Why are we doing that? You realize you're wearing the symbol of a Roman torture device. Right?
Oh, I was just thinking of ephod, and I was thinking where the sword was. It was behind that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was right next to the sacred vest, like
Yeah.
garment from.
Yeah. So it's next to the ephod, the priestly garment. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it connects into the bread of the presence stuff. And remember, Jesus, what does he say when he consecrates the communion? He says, "This is my bread," or "This is my body. The bread is my body, and the wine is my blood, broken and shed." Right. So it's all through the cross that he secures the new priesthood, right? Or the eternal priesthood, Jesus does. So again, the connection of the sword of Goliath with the priesthood for some reason, and David, right? It's all little seeds that are pointing forward toward what we see in the New Testament with Jesus. You guys following me there? Pretty cool, huh? Who would know that without the whole context, right? So when you think of the sword of Goliath in the future, whenever you're hearing about the story of David or reading, you can think of the cross, okay? You can think of Jesus using the weapon of his enemies to secure the victory, okay? And taking that up as his standard, as his banner, as the symbol of victory, okay? For future victories. Good? So Goliath's sword becomes David's own sword, and using the enemy's terrible and devastating weapon against his own enemies, David foreshadows the transformation of the cross from something terrible and devastating into something life-giving and glorious. Now, let's just read a few more in the next verses in the next chapter, picking up at verse 11, because we have to know why Doeg the Edomite was mentioned. Okay, picking up at verse 11. In 1 Samuel chapter 22. King Saul immediately sent for Ahimelech and all his family who served as priests in Nob. When they arrived, Saul shouted at him, "Listen to me, you son of Ahitub." "What is it, my king?" Ahimelech said. "Why have you and the son of Jesse conspired against me?" Saul demanded. "Why did you give him food and a sword? Why have you consulted God for him? Why have you encouraged him to kill me, as he is trying to do this very day?" "But sir," Ahimelech replied, "is anyone among all your servants as faithful as David, your son-in-law? Why is he the captain of your bodyguard and a highly honored member of your household? This was certainly not the first time I had consulted God for him. May the king not accuse me and my family for this matter, for I knew nothing at all of any plot against you." "You will surely die, Ahimelech, along with your entire family," the king shouted. And he ordered his bodyguards, "Kill these priests of Yahweh, for they are allies and conspirators with David. They knew he was running away from me, but they didn't tell me." But Saul's men refused to kill Yahweh's priests. Then the king said to Doeg, "You do it." So Doeg the Edomite turned on them and killed them that day, 85 priests in all, still wearing the ephod. Then he went to Nob, the town of the priests, and killed the priests' families, men and women, children and babies, and all the cattle, donkeys, sheep, and goats. Only Abiathar, one of the sons of Ahimelech, escaped and fled to David. When he told David that Saul had killed the priests of Yahweh, David exclaimed, "I knew it when I saw the Doeg the Edomite there that day. I knew he was sure to tell Saul. Now I have caused the death of all your father's family. Stay here with me and don't be afraid. I will protect you with my own life, for the same person wants to kill us both." Really tragic story, by the way, which just goes to show how off the freaking rails Saul is, right? He is massacring an entire town of priests, of holy men and their families. Even it's so interesting that like his own men wouldn't do it. So he has to have this outcast person, and his men do it, right? And just slaughter all these priests. So again, within the greater context of everything we just said about David and the priesthood, it's sort of about David is going to be a new kind of priest. There's this unfortunate, culling of the older priests, but David is going to represent sort of the establishment of a new kind of priesthood. And that is going to be, well, really his priesthood is not new. It's an older priesthood. It's a better priesthood. It's a more ancient priesthood. That is the priesthood of Melchizedek. By what authority does David have to put on the ephod and bring the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem? Come next week and we'll talk about it. Okay. Sound good, guys? All right, let's do the next story. But before we do, any more comments and thoughts about this story before we move on?
God detained him there.
Sure. Well, what was that about? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go back to them to share some.
Well, why it doesn't say why Doeg is at Nob where the priests are. Yeah, it just doesn't say that. It doesn't give you context. So why is he there? I don't know. But you're bringing up something again. We haven't been able to get into it. There's follow-up here, unfortunate follow-up here from earlier stuff in the book of Samuel having to do with the corrupt priesthood of Eli, which we just can't get into today, unfortunately. So, but you can get into it if you go and read and study that for yourself. So, good. Which, again, generations earlier, there was a sort of this corrupt priesthood with Eli and his sons and stuff like that. So
did they just stand there and let themselves be killed? How did he kill that many?
Well, these are not fighting men. Yeah. Oh, you mean because it seems like he's just one person? Yeah, theoretically, I don't know. Theoretically, he's got, sure, just stabbing all of them. No, I got you. Theoretically, he's got his own band of bandits with him. Yeah. And I'm just saying it's safe to assume that, it's naming him as sort of the chief person who was responsible for this, who was able to do what, what Saul's men would not. But anyway. There's not a lot said about Doeg. So there's later interpretations and sort of, assumptions, legends about a figure like that, which may or may not be true. So, but the point here is that Saul has gone off the rails. That's sort of the main point, is Saul's going nuts. Okay. Anyway, again, come next week, because we're going to talk more about this, a lot more about this in regard to David and the priesthood, him being a king and not a Levite, but somehow he's a priest. And it's going to enlighten you, hopefully, quite a bit in regard to sort of what is the expectation of who Messiah is going to be in the New Testament. Let's continue. Go to chapter 24 now. So now David has been on the run for a while, and we're going to read another story about an encounter with Saul and David, okay? After Saul returned from fighting the Philistines, he was told that David had gone into the wilderness of En Gedi. So Saul chose 3,000 elite troops from all Israel and went to search for David and his men near the rocks of the wild goats. At the place where the road passes some sheepfolds, Saul went into a cave to relieve himself. But as it happened, David and his men were hiding further back in that very cave. "Now's your opportunity," David's men whispered to him. "Today, Yahweh is telling you, I will certainly put your enemy into your power to do with as you wish." So David crept forward and cut off a piece of the hem of Saul's robe. But then David's conscience began bothering him because he had cut Saul's robe. He said to his men, "Yahweh forbid that I should do this to my lord and king. I shouldn't attack Yahweh's anointed, for Yahweh himself has chosen him." So David restrained his men and did not let them kill Saul. After Saul had left the cave and gone on his way, David came out and shouted after him, "My lord the king!" And when Saul looked around, David bowed low before him. Then he shouted to Saul, "Why do you listen to the people who say I am trying to harm you? This very day you can see with your own eyes that it isn't true, for Yahweh placed you at my mercy back there in the cave. Some of my men told me to kill you, but I spared you. For I said, I will never harm the king. He is Yahweh's anointed one. Look, my father, at what I have in my hand. It is a piece of the hem of your robe. I cut it off, but I didn't kill you. This proves that I'm not trying to harm you and that I have not sinned against you, even though you have been hunting me to kill me. May the Lord judge between us. Perhaps Yahweh will punish you for what you were trying to do to me, but I will never harm you. As that old proverb says, from evil people come evil deeds. so you can be sure that I will never harm you. Who is the king of Israel trying to catch anyway? Should he spend his time chasing one who is as worthless as a dead dog or a single flea? May Yahweh therefore judge which of us is in the right and punish the guilty one. He is my advocate, and he will rescue me from your power." When David had finished speaking, Saul called back, "Is that really you, my son David?" Then he began to cry. And he said to David, "You are a better man than I am, for you have repaid me good for evil. Yes, you have been amazingly kind to me today. For when Yahweh put me in a place where you could have killed me, you didn't do it. Who else would let his enemy get away when he had him in his power? May Yahweh reward you for the kindness you have shown me today. And now I realize that you are surely going to be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will flourish under your rule. Now swear to me by Yahweh that when that happens, you will not kill my family and destroy my line of descendants." So David promised this to Saul with an oath. Then Saul went home, but David and his men went back to their stronghold. It's a really profound little story.
I love this part
Yeah? What do you love about it?
because it's showing how God is using each person. Like David, the pursuit. It's like chasing cat and dog. It's like why? But then God is teaching David patience and faithfulness, and then He's teaching Samuel with He's teaching him through his rebelliousness.
Yeah. It's good. So let me just summarize. David spares King Saul. While hiding in En Gedi, David is presented with an opportunity to kill Saul. However, David does not take up the opportunity. He spares Saul's life and appeals to Saul's conscience to prove his innocence. The two part ways and mutually let each other go. Other notes, thoughts, comments?
Well, it's kind of like Brenda. I was thinking that one of the things I love about this is that David honors Saul as God's anointed. So he's fearing God, but honoring man.
Yeah.
And there's something that, again, he's like God in this. David's like God. I mean, when David does things right, he does them really right.
Yeah.
He does some wrong things too, but I mean, this is a sense in which God honors us, even though we deserve.
Yeah. It's really good insight. Yeah, so God is merciful to us when we deserve death. Yeah, very, very good.
And just how he didn't move up off of his own men, telling him what to do.
Yeah.
And that the key word you said, the verse he said, God is my advocate. That's you know, an advocate is somebody publicly
Sure.
it's this is the person that I put my trust into man. Put my trust into my weapons.
Yeah.
I put my trust into God. I consult him first.
That's good. So David sees this as an opportunity to prove his innocence because of when he says, Yahweh is my advocate. He's saying, look, God himself is testifying before you all because he gave me an opportunity to kill you and I didn't take it. So am I really after your throne, King Saul? Because look how this ended up, right? I've essentially proved myself, right? That I'm honoring of you. Now, is David truly supposed to be the king of Israel? Yes.
But I think what's so interesting what you just said, David so trusts God.
Right.
That he said, yes, okay, I've been anointed, but God hasn't told me, and the way you're going to get to be king is by killing the other king. It's the same thing as Abraham and Sarah saying, well, we can have kids, so you go and, have
So good.
It's like, no, David so trusts God and how God's going to do it. He's like, nope, I'm not going to take this into my own hands. And if I'm supposed to be king, it will happen, but not because I'm going to kill you. God's going to deal with you, but you're God's anointed. I'm not going to be the one.
Genesis chapter 3, anyone? The fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil?
That might be, what you call it, Jesus. Jesus is there, but he's like, hey, show yourself, that you are this person.
Yep. So you brought it up. During David's fugitive years, David again displays in iconic fashion his role as a type of Christ, but in a very unique way. What's hidden in between the lines of the story is God's sovereignty, which turns what seems to be a coincidence into a test. And the theme of the test is so relevant. It's probably one of the most relevant themes in the entire Bible, and that is the test of Adam and Eve with the two trees. Will you take or will you not take in what God has presented before you, or you not to take, right? Same thing with Abraham and Sarah would be another iteration of this. We've been promised this thing, but are we going to get it out of our own might? Are we going to try to conjure up the blessing by taking Hagar, the slave, and giving birth to Ishmael, as opposed to waiting on God's provision? This is time and time again sort of the theme of God's chosen people are given a promise and then told to wait. This is the people in the wilderness complaining, right? Or, any times that you have in the Bible, an example of a promise is given to a chosen one, and they commonly will screw up. They commonly will mess up because they take in advance what they should be waiting for, right? So there's many, many things that we could say. Number one, let's think about Jesus. Let's think about Jesus as he says, right now I could call down legions of angels and my Father would do it. My Father would honor me, but I will not do it, right? Because for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, right? The idea is that the patient endurance of his suffering will bring about the true reward. So you can see this as David's cross moment, right? Or his Garden of Gethsemane moment. He could, in power, in his own might, take for himself what he wants, or he could wait on the provision and the deliverance of God. He uses it as an opportunity to declare his innocence and prove his innocence, but not to kill the king. Now, this is what's super important. David is thinking very, very wisely on a broader level. If he just up and kills the king, what does that say about his own throne? How can you expect people to respect your throne? How can you expect people to respect your throne if you don't respect the authorities that are in place at the given moment? And think about that. Think about how I'll skip forward to a slide and then I'll go back. We are commanded to submit to governing authorities by the apostles. Now, the people who are writing this verse here, let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there's no authority except from God, and those authorities that exist have been instituted by God, and therefore whoever resists authority resists what God has appointed, and those who resist incur judgment. This is the Apostle Paul writing, who's living under Caesar, a pagan dictator. Not just the king of Israel, a pagan dictator. And I'm pretty sure he's tapping into this image of David, that the moment you strike out against the authority, you have essentially undermined your witness and innocence before God. That God has granted you authority, but you are to handle that authority with respect of those who have earthly authority, right?
And how about somebody like Hitler?
Yeah.
I mean, he's head,
It's a great question. So famously, a pastor named Bonhoeffer, Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Because he's not honoring God.
Yeah, that's a really good point and a very difficult question to answer. I was going to say Dietrich Bonhoeffer famously is a pastor who planted a bomb underneath Hitler's seat. And then last minute, they changed up the seating arrangement in the room for the meeting that he was a part of. And Hitler, the bomb went off, but Hitler survived. That's pretty wild. It's a good question. I don't think I can get into that today. My point here is, when we think about David honoring Saul, it's the purity and integrity of it, that he's not going to take for himself violently what is due to him, right? But he's going to wait on the promises of God and the deliverance of God. You can think about every martyr who ever lived and died. The point is that they subjected themselves innocently to whoever had power over them. And the promise of God, which is only, you're only able to understand this through the mind of faith, is that God will vindicate you. Do we believe that those who have their heads chopped off by Islamists, jihadists, will be vindicated? Do we believe that? Will they receive the deliverance and the, fulfillment of the promises of God? right? Will they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of the point is, will David receive his kingdom or will he not, you know? Well, he's given an opportunity, and he uses that opportunity to prove innocence more so than to take for himself. Right? So
I really like when it says that David bowed down. I don't have my glasses. I can't see the verse.
that's okay.
But when David bowed down
Yeah.
and prostrated himself with his face to the ground,
It's yeah.
that was a strong indication that his faith and his trust, because he could have killed them.
Yeah.
While he was down on that ground, he could have took his life.
Yeah.
But his trust and his faith in God, to know that, you know what, I'm gonna obey God. I'm gonna do what God tell me to do. And
It's the extreme humility of it.
That's what I
Yes.
say. It's just humbleness.
Yeah. This is the man who just slaughtered all those priests that he's bowing down before. Again, think about this verse. You know what I mean? Think about how radical it is for Paul to say that. And again, the point is, if you read the church fathers, for example, they're going to say time and again, you know, these are the earliest writings and earliest accounts of the Christians. They're going to say, like, listen, the Christians are so hated and they don't break any laws. The only laws that they break are, you know, the fact that they are saying that there's one God, like, and you know, but they're not like inciting riots, and they're not, you know, inciting insurrections, and like they're so hated, but for what reason? What have they done wrong? And they're standing in the tradition or the model set by David and later set by David's son, Jesus. When you think of this story, you can think of Jesus standing before Pilate, for example, who has all the power in the world to break out, all the power within and without the world, right? He's God, right? He created the world, and he humbles himself before the guilty man, right? It's what you said. We, humanity, are Saul, and David is God or Jesus in this story, who sacrifices himself, who relinquishes himself, humbles himself. Obedient to the point of death, therefore God highly exalted him. Philippians chapter 2. So
There's a couple things too at the end of this chapter. One is there's a prophetic quality to what Saul says. May the Lord reward you for the way you treated me today. I know you will surely be king, and the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. So it's like almost this rare moment of repentance, like
absolutely,
he's like prophetically speaking over David.
Yeah.
And then he has him swear this oath.
Yeah.
About not eliminating his family, which then makes me think of Mephibosheth.
Yeah, I know. Oh yeah, we'll have to get into that next week. I'll have to include that. That's good. So David passes the test, right? The incident at En Gedi fits undeniably well with the pattern of the test throughout the Bible, from Genesis 3's fall to the binding of Isaac to Saul's failure to kill Agag. In this story, David does not see and take, but patiently awaits the timing of the Lord. David carries his cross by submitting himself to vulnerability, even though it is unjust. When you don't see and take for yourself victory or vengeance, that's a moment in which you trust in God. So thinking your own life of times when someone has mistreated you and you have the opportunity to get back. Do you take that opportunity?
No.
Okay.
Because the Bible said, God said, revenge is mine, I will repay.
Uh-huh.
So even though you feel you might want to, but at the same time, God, you trust in God to handle that situation for you. I have learned in my experience, if I get in my flesh and want to do something to someone and retaliate, it ends in confusion. But if I wait on God and trust in Him, it ends in peace.
And personal sanctification, right? You are put through the testing of that fire, right? And you come out more pure for it. That's for sure.
Yeah, but Christian law enforcement, and I see somebody trying to kill somebody else. I have to protect that person from doing that, even though I trust that Yet eventually God's going to get it
Yeah.
back. So I don't think it's always that easy.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we're not necessarily, we're not,
Or
yeah, we're not.
Specifically talking about when you've been, you literally said, think about a time when you have been
Wronged.
wronged,
Mm-hmm.
and you have a chance to get vengeance.
Yeah.
Not,
that part's
not
easy
so
too.
much like law enforcement protecting it.
Yeah. So I'm not talking about the question of pacifism generally, or, there are some Christian traditions which will completely abandon any sense of law enforcement or warfare. That's not what I'm really getting at. I'm actually saying the opposite. So when later on in this verse, Paul will say directly that the point of government is to punish the wicked, right? That the point of government is to stop people from doing bad things to other people, essentially, is what he'll say. That's the point, right? And so he's saying, if you break out against that, you are subverting sort of the whole order of what government is meant for in the first place. So what you're saying is actually in line with what Paul is saying. But the point that I'm trying to make is, when you feel like something unjust, you're being unjustly persecuted, it's not your job to take for yourself an opportunity to strike out against the persecutor. Okay?
I say myself, sometimes I win, sometimes I don't in that test, man. I think it's because of all of us as a human.
Of course.
That's our thing, is to want to take stuff in our own hands.
Yeah.
Just have it be, so.
And that, well, again, the main point is just like, do you trust God to bring justice? It's your opportunity to ask yourself that question. Do I actually trust God, or do I have to do it?
Very next chapter with the story of Nabal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
David's taken it into his own hands, and God subverts
Yeah.
that
Mm-hmm.
from happening. So
Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't get into that today.
just
But
saying.
yeah.
But it's the next chapter.
Yeah.
You get this one chapter where
And
Yeah.
he does the right thing.
he does the right thing.
Yeah.
And the next chapter is like, I'm going to go take care of this.
Yeah. No, for sure. And David's got some major failures to come, so we'll definitely focus on some of those.
God basically saves him from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Abigail becomes his foil in that situation. Yeah. Good. I find it appropriate at this point to just read a couple Psalms. Psalm 63 is written during David's time in the cave in En Gedi, and I'm going to read it. You can turn to it. I also will have it up on the screen. The heading says, "A Psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah." That's where and you'll find En Gedi, an oasis. "O God, you are my God. I seek you. My soul thirsts for you. My flesh faints for you, as in a dry and weary land where there is no water. So I have looked upon you in the sanctuary, beholding your power and glory. Because your steadfast love is better than life, my lips will praise you. So I will bless you as long as I live. I will lift up my hands and call on your name. My soul is satisfied as with a rich feast, and my mouth praises you with joyful lips. When I think of you on my bed and meditate on you in the watches of the night, for you have been my help. In the shadow of your wings I sing for joy. But those who seek to destroy my life shall go down into the depths of the earth. They shall be given over to the power of the sword. They shall be prey for jackals. But the king shall rejoice in God. All who swear by him shall exult, for the mouths of liars will be stopped." So it says that he wrote this when he was in the wilderness, right? And again, it's what it's showing you is David has like greater things on his mind, right? Greater things on his mind than just, oh, am I just going to sit on that throne? Again, something that I didn't get at here is this is just such a unique story for an ancient king. It's so unique to have someone surrender themselves in vulnerability before an oppressor, right? Like, that is completely novel in the ancient world. In an ancient world where strength and might means right. But here, humility and faith and trust in God makes right. Okay? It's completely upside down. That's why it's called the upside down kingdom. Small little note, the wilderness of En Gedi. I took this photo in En Gedi, so if you guys can see it. On the coast of the Dead Sea is the canyon where David found respite. En Gedi is a popular location today for hiking and camping. Not wild. Among locals and pilgrims, right? In the middle. So when my dad was in Israel a couple years ago, or maybe it was recent, I don't remember. He sent a video of people in En Gedi, a bunch of French people singing a worship song hymn at what's called the Spring of David there in En Gedi, just, praising God in the midst of this, where this story took place, right? In the middle of the Judean wilderness, this canyon is home to many springs and creeks, as well as the wild goat known as the ibex. This is the location where David was hiding in 1 Samuel chapter 24, when King Saul went to relieve himself in one of the caves like those here. Those are actually massive, by the way. These are up here. I don't know how you would get up there. So there are more caves actually on the floor. You know what I mean? But yeah, all the rock is just full of interwoven caves, and so when it says David is hiding further back in, truly it's like an ant farm, you know what I mean, within the rocks there. In this place, David encamped as a fugitive during the persecution of King Saul, and is also where he is able to pen many of the Psalms that we know and cherish today. Psalms 57, 142, 63 are among those written on the run, surrounded by natural spring waters, cave, and ibex goats, right? So when he says, as the deer pants for the water, so my soul pants for you, right? He's thinking about what he experienced and saw, was actually looking at. You can imagine he's watching an ibex goat drink from the springs, the natural springs flowing out of. And I'm telling you, when I tell you that this is an oasis in the middle of nothing, it truly is in a way. This is right by the Dead Sea, guys. Okay? It's an oasis in the middle of nothing. Okay? And this is where he finds refuge. And so that's where I will go to Psalm 23 now. One of the most famous Psalms, probably the most famous Psalm, but we'll just read it for the sake of it. Normally I would do this during our Psalms meeting, but I'm going to make more room in that and just do it here because I think it's relevant. Of course, the Psalm goes, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Yahweh my whole life long." You should be thinking, especially at the end there, I shall dwell in the house of Yahweh. Think back to David visiting the tabernacle where he got the showbread and the sword of Goliath, the house of Yahweh. Why is he saying I will dwell there forever? He thinks of himself as this is, again, where he was emboldened and provided for as he was going out into the wilderness, into the dark valley, right?
My understanding too of surely goodness and mercy shall follow me, that really means pursue me.
Mhm.
Being pursued.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else a lot of people miss. You don't want to disconnect the first stanza from the second. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He leads me. He makes me lie down in green pastures, still waters, but he also leads me into the darkest valley. I will not fear. You are with me in the valley. So if the sheep goes into the dark valley, the shepherd let him there, right? You are leading me in the first and second stanza. You are leading me in places that I don't necessarily know if I want to go there, but I won't fear because you're with me there, right? Your rod and your staff. Think of the shepherd's crook, right? That goes around the neck of the sheep as they're being guided to different spots, right? And then the table before me in the presence of my enemies, of course, that is that table of showbread that we were talking about earlier, right? You provide for me from your sanctuary where I will dwell forever.
Have you read the Shepherd books of Psalm 23?
I have not, no, but I've heard a lot about it. Yeah, I've heard a lot about it. Yeah.
It's like $6 on Amazon.
Oh, well,
and
I'll
I
get it.
recommend it because it's a shepherd, Philip Keller.
Yeah.
That's his name. Teaches you what shepherds do.
Yeah.
And it totally informs this whole
Absolutely.
psalm
Mm-hmm.
in different ways.
Yep.
Of context.
Yeah. When we were in Israel, we were driving in a desert, in the Judean desert, and there was a little tiny patch of grass in the middle of the desert. And our tour guide said, when David's writing Psalm 23, he's talking about that patch of grass. He's not talking about rolling green hills. He's not talking about, the highlands of Great Britain, right? He's talking about this little tiny patch of grass here in the middle of a desert. So again, you can think of En Gedi, you can think of an oasis, right? A provision of God that like everything around you is just chaos and disorder, but here now is a garden, right?
I think that's like with trust. Like it's easy to me, with myself, for me to like look at God and trust you when things are going pretty well.
Exactly. Yeah, it's so easy for if you're in those great rolling green highlands to say, God is so good, right? Yeah, but what happens when there's nothing and no one and you're in a dry wilderness? My soul thirsts for you, O God, right? You're looking for that provision.
What got me in the video that I was looking at was I didn't realize how much the shepherd had to know.
Yeah.
Where to find the grass, where to find the water, what path to take, how to do this, how to do that. I just figured, okay, they're out there.
Right, just sort of wandering around.
Grass and stuff like that. But yeah, how skilled they really had to be in order to take care of the sheep and really know
Absolutely.
What was going on.
Yeah, if you guys did not watch that video, definitely recommend it. That I
You
said.
look at it at a distance and you think, it's barren. You come up close and you see the different places where God has provided and where they go.
Absolutely.
In order to
small little spots. Yeah. And it should be extremely relevant for all of us. We go through wilderness all the time, right?
I just think how cool it is that God made him a shepherd. David a shepherd to even be able to.
Yeah.
Because there's so much imagery of that.
He's writing from what he knows. Yeah.
He's writing from what he knows, but because of that, he's able to connect all this stuff from the sacrificial lamb to the this to the that. Like it's all
Absolutely.
Jesus, the good shepherd. Like But if you haven't had that background, it's cool.
Yeah. David is king, shepherd, priest, prophet. Again, did I say David or did I say Jesus? I meant David. I said David. I thought I said Jesus, right? So and I could have, right?
But if you read that book that I recommended, it explains that like how lowly a shepherd job. It is such a lowly, lowly.
Yeah. So lowly position. Yeah, it's called A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23. I have not read it, but yeah.
Have you ever read the book Streams in the Desert?
No.
Streams in the Desert is about that same thing. Trying to find different spots. You're in the darkness. You don't know where to go. Trying to find the different spots in the wilderness. It's an old book, but it's good.
It's a daily devotion.
So we do need to move on because we need to do the story of the Necromancer. So we do need to move on, but let me summarize just by saying the whole test with Saul is emblematic. It brings together all these elements of the idea of David is a fugitive, but he finds himself in the sanctuary of the Lord, and there is the sword of Goliath, right? This great hope, this great standard that he is able to bring with him and say, I trust in God, there's the showbread, that the table that is prepared before me. Okay, good?
And when you read the story, I don't know how you can help but not love David.
I know.
I remember reading that going, I want to be this way.
That's sort of what I was trying to get at, is for a long time, David gets to become sort of a true example. You know what I mean? Like he presents, and then he has this great fall. He's not sinless. That's what makes Jesus the true, pure example, right? But the point here is what you're saying about what you love about David is ultimately the things that are pointing forward to Jesus, right?
Perfect, but I love his intimacy.
Right. Yeah, he has a very intimate relationship with God, which we can read about in the Psalms for sure. Cool. All right, one creepy, weird story, which is sure to here's the deal. It's supposed to incite a lot of conversation, which we're not going to have too much time to talk it. So in the next 15 minutes, we'll be able to talk through this. Okay. How does that sound? Good, guys. All right. So turn to to 1 Samuel chapter 28 now. 1 Samuel chapter 28. And we're tonally shifting intensely right now, okay? So starting at verse 1. About that time, the Philistines mustered their armies for another war with Israel. King Achish told David, hang on, what? We skipped over many verses. David is now living amongst the Philistines and is now working with King Achish of the Philistines. So if you watched the show, that enemy of Jonathan that shows up in the show, yeah, David's going to be hanging out with him for a long time, actually. So pretty interesting. Anyway, here's the point. So you and your men will be expected to join me in battle. Very well, David agreed. You can go see for yourself what we can do. Picking up at verse 3. Now Samuel had died, and all Israel had mourned for him. He was buried at Ramah in his hometown. And Saul had banned from all the land of Israel all mediums and those who consult the spirits of the dead. And Saul gathered all the army of Israel and camped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the vast Philistine army, he became frantic with fear. He asked Yahweh what he should do, but Yahweh refused to answer him, either by dreams or by sacred law or by the prophets. Saul then said to his advisors, find a woman who is a medium so I can go ask her what to do. His advisors replied, there is a medium at Endor. So Saul disguised himself by wearing ordinary clothing instead of his royal robes, and he went to the woman's home at night, accompanied by 2 of his men. I have to talk to a man who has died, he said. Will you call up his spirit for me? Are you trying to get me killed? The woman demanded. You know that Saul has outlawed all the mediums and all who consult the spirits of the dead. Why are you setting a trap for me? But Saul took an oath in the name of Yahweh and promised, as surely as Yahweh lives, nothing bad will happen to you for doing this. Finally, the woman said, well, whose spirit are you trying to get me to call up? Call up Samuel, Saul replied. When the woman saw Samuel, she screamed, you have deceived me. You are Saul. Don't be afraid, the king told her. What do you see? I see a god coming up out of the earth, she said. What does he look like? Saul asked. He is an old man wrapped up in a robe, she replied. Saul realized it was Samuel, and he fell to the ground before him. Why have you disturbed me by calling me back? Samuel asked Saul. Because I am in deep trouble, Saul replied. The Philistines are at war with me, and God has left me and won't reply by prophets or by dreams. So I have called for you to tell me what to do. But Samuel replied, why ask me, since Yahweh has left you and has become your enemy? Yahweh has done just as he said he would. He has torn the kingdom from you and given it to your rival, David. Yahweh has done this to you today because you refused to carry out his fierce anger against the Amalekites. What's more, Yahweh will hand you and the army of Israel over to the Philistines tomorrow, and you and your sons will be here with me. Dun, dun, dun. Yahweh will bring down the entire army of Israel in defeat. Saul fell full length on the ground, paralyzed with fright because of Samuel's words. He was also faint with hunger, for he had not eaten anything all day and all night. When the woman saw how distraught she was, Sir, I obeyed the command at the risk of my life. Now do what I say and let me give you a little something to eat so you can regain your strength for the trip back. But Saul refused to eat anything. Then his advisors joined the woman in urging him to eat, so he finally yielded and got up from the ground and sat on the couch. The woman had been fattening a calf, so she hurried and killed it, took some flour, kneaded it into dough, brought the meal to Saul and his advisor, and they ate it. And they went out in the night. Saul's last meal, right? And then we can jump to, let's see, chapter 31. Picking up at verse 1. Now the Philistines attacked Israel, and the men of Israel fled before them. Many were slaughtered on the slopes of Mount Gilboa. The Philistines closed in on Saul and his sons, and they killed 3 of his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The fighting grew fierce, very fierce around Saul, and the Philistine archers caught up with him and wounded him severely. Saul groaned to his armor-bearer, take your sword and kill me before these pagan Philistines come and run me through and taunt me and torture me. But his armor-bearer was afraid and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When his armor-bearer realized Saul was dead, he fell on his own sword and died beside the king. So Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and his troops all died together on that day. And we'll stop there. So very tragic end. So Saul visits the witch. Threatened by the advance of the Philistines, Saul seeks divine guidance, but with no success. He resorts to hiring a witch necromancer to contact the spirit of Saul from the realm of the dead. The result is condemnation upon Saul. He will not live to see the end of his next major battle. He will not live to see the sunrise 2 days from now, right? Okay, thoughts, comments, questions that arise from the text for you?
I know one of the Psalms you just read, it said, David said your love is better than life.
Mm.
I was thinking about that, just like what happened with Saul right now. It's like, I think not having God's presence with you, it's like,
Yeah.
you have all the stuff in the world, and all everything, but it's not to have that. I think that's like the definition, I think, to me. It's not God's presence. I just seen how Saul, once he didn't have his presence and that with him, it was like,
Yep.
he wanted to die. He was like, pretty much over, like, you know what, there's no hope. It's not cool that he died.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. What else, guys?
This stuff is real,
Okay.
and that there are reasons why God says not to do it. You're supposed to trust me,
Mm-hmm.
and not try to go figure it out for yourself. Because there are other ways.
So by this stuff, you mean witchcraft and necromancy? And what do you guys think about that? It's a really odd story. Are ghosts real? According to the Bible? Yeah. Interesting, huh? Anyone troubled by the story? Explain.
Well, because it also says it is appointed once for man to die and man to face judgment, right? So the idea of it actually, and I know that this is totally probably, what's the other word? I'm putting into the scriptures.
Eisegeting?
Yeah, and I've heard lots of different teaching about all this stuff over the years, so it's kind of, it's all a mix of stuff. But I think that the idea that that Satan can deceive through these things too. So, like mediums that talk to your dead loved ones, are they talking to your dead loved ones? Or is Satan deceiving you through that? So yeah.
So there's a question, is this really Samuel or is it not?
I question if it's really Samuel. And if it is, that wasn't a witch that just conjured him up in my mind. It would be God allowing him or a being that looked like him for him to appear.
You could say God is permitting the event to take place. Yeah.
But also, like when people engage in witchcraft, it is always about taking it into our own hands, wanting to have power.
Okay, good. So let's ask the question, what is witchcraft? Because we haven't really addressed this entire study. Rebellion, yeah. Well, number one, it's a rebellious act. Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 10, let no one be found among you who sacrifices their son or daughter in the fire and does things like it. Divination or sorcery, interprets omens, engages in witchcraft.
It's like it's trying to be God. To me, witchcraft is trying to have the powers of God without submitting to God.
Yeah. So the Hebrew word for sorcerer is kafash or kashaf. Sorry, I mix those around. In the Bible, someone who practices witchcraft, otherwise known as sorcery, is someone who attempts to gain power or knowledge for oneself by means of ritualistic operations involving spells and mantras, the mixing of elements into different kinds of potions, and the reading of omens via signs or patterns found in the natural world. So the gaining of power and knowledge through ritualistic means so that you can enact power in a certain way. Most all pagan styles of worship involve something having to do with that system or that formula, okay? The best way to think about witchcraft or sort of pagan idolatry versus the worship prescribed to the Israelites is directionally you can think of witchcraft as the building of the Tower of Babel, right? The building or the climbing of the building of a staircase and the climbing of stairs to reach the heavens, to make a name for yourself, right? That you are tapping into the powers in such a way that you are mastering them and gaining control over the world, okay? You're gaining control over the natural elements of the world and the unseen spiritual elements of the world, taking that power into yourself and therefore enacting it. And you're doing it through your practice, through your process, right, of ritual that is gaining for yourself a power. I sort of think of, and yeah, when you think, I don't want to like turn anyone off to what I'm about to say, but I sort of think of yoga, for example. And I know people, it's just stretching for some people, right? But the stretches are born in a system that involves, as you do the stretches, they channel you into powers, right? They channel you into calling upon powers of certain gods in order to go about your day, right? In a way that manifests realities that you want, right? I'm not condemning stretching. Okay? Just want to say that. But that's an example of, again, the heart of something like that in these systems, or concoction of spells and potions, right? The idea that if I say this thing, if I say this mantra over and over again, I'm going to manifest some power in the world, right? Or if I conduct, or if I, yeah, word of faith movement, is that what you're, yeah.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, I think that in my background in more charismatic, which I believe in the gifts of the Holy Spirit,
Right.
I think they're there for today and all those things, but I think that people fall into that unintentionally.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that. I think
Yeah.
that people, in an attempt to see God move and see miracles and see these things, they fall into some ritualistic things
Right.
that they say. Some things because they're wanting, it's that internal need for power. Like,
It's the seeing and taking.
So yeah, so it's like when Bethel, just when they prayed for that little girl to be risen from the dead, when she died, the 3-year-old. You know, and it's like, well, if we say these things, and if I say them this way, and if I don't say this, but if I say it that way,
Right.
and
It's very spell-like.
It's very spell-like.
Yeah.
And I think that is a huge warning.
Right.
For us, that like as you seek to see God move in miraculous ways, that you're always humble. And I see people on prayer threads on Facebook telling God what to do. Like, telling God that this person will not die, basically.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, okay, but there's got to be humility to God's will and to his authority in that as well. So while you're saying, I believe you can do this,
Yeah.
it's not, you're going to do this because I said so. Because you know what I mean? God is not subject to me. I'm subject to
So that's exactly the point. The directionality of witchcraft is I'm ascending myself, right? The directionality of, you could say, what is the Bible is talking about is that God is coming down and meeting you, right? And that God is actually an agent who can decide whether or not you are not tapping into a formula of sort of the unseen rules of the universe and then tapping into that and harnessing power. That God is actually someone who is able to make decisions whether or not you do whatever it is that you're doing. Okay? Does that make sense?
Just a balancing word to that.
Sure.
I knew you'd say something, God, and I totally.
Okay.
I was trying very hard to be very.
You're very diplomatic. But I'm just saying the poles are presumption and unbelief.
Yeah.
Jesus dealt with unbelief a lot more than presumption. I think.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm just
That's
saying
true.
That faith requires risk.
It does.
Absolutely.
Unbelief requires
Absolutely.
nothing.
It does. It requires risk, but it's still faith.
No, I
of what
understand, and I think this is what we're talking about in this story.
Faith of what
Is
I
that
can
when
do.
it starts to become us centered, rather
And I
than God
think even the phrase faith healer puts like the word that's used, it puts it on the person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Instead of
As the subject of the one who's healing. So use this. Yeah.
healer, and that's just weird vernacular that we use in semantics.
Right.
But it means something. It shows something.
Use this story as the prime example. It says that Yahweh has not given a message. So he seeks means to conjure a message. He seeks means outside of what has already been stated to bring about something that is not given, not naturally in the process of what he knows to be true. He knows that God has not spoken, so he's going to go manufacture a situation in which that can happen. And he does so by necromancy even. So the thing about necromancy is it's not just reading of signs in omens or, things like that. Necromancy is someone who is trained in the art of communication with the departed spirits who dwell in the underworld, right? The realm of the dead. So in that case, necromancy involves trying to get power and knowledge from the underworld, from the realm of the dead. You know what I mean? So it's like You're not even seeking high heaven. You're not even looking at the stars even. You're looking at the realm of, you're going downward, you know what I mean? Like if I'm not getting a message from anywhere in all creation, I will go to the realm of the dead even to, to manufacture this formula, of what's going to happen, right? And so you can think of the Witch of Endor as, a person who is involved with the realm, with the spirits of the dead, right? Whether or not this is Samuel is a good question. I personally interpret this as genuinely being Samuel, permitted situation by God. But the point here is, what is witchcraft? It is manufacturing power and control, trying to conjure knowledge, right? Trying to conjure effects in the world, as opposed to waiting on God's deliverance. And I guess this is the point that I'm trying to get at with how this is all connected with pagan worship generally, is that when you sacrifice to a pagan god, it's because you're trying to barter with it, trying to get something from it. When you sacrifice, this is so constant in the biblical witness and extra biblical early, New Testament church witness, that you don't give God things because he needs them. You give God things because that's changing you to be more like him, right? That you're being transformed into who you're supposed to be in your relationship with God. You're not trying to just get from God, and barter and harness the powers of the world, that sort of, or harness the power of God.
One thing I see is that Samuel doesn't stop being a prophet even after he's dead.
Yeah. So that brings up a good thing. Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of things that we could say about the afterlife presentation in the Bible. We can't get into it today. We're out of time.
I think we take stuff with us.
Yeah.
That God does eternally with us.
Yeah.
It's another reason why I think that really was Samuel.
Yeah.
Because it was his
voice.
But I mean, yeah, it
sounded like him. He said, "I told you that God would tear the kingdom away." So I don't think the biblical author is like tongue in cheek. This isn't really Samuel. You know what I mean? The prophetic witness this is Samuel. Take note that the real witches and warlocks attested to in the Bible only bear small resemblance to those of pop culture media, of witches riding broomsticks and, Witchcraft inherently is about power and control, meaning it is practiced in order to obtain special secret knowledge or conjure up certain results by casting spells or bartering favor from spiritual beings. Historically, witchcraft is practiced on the fringes of society and outside of the institutional systems of pagan practice, but they are connected philosophically. I think of people who go into the jungles of the Amazon to do their ayahuasca trips with shamans and things like that so that they can contact the Kundalini spirit and somehow achieve greatness in the American, economic system. It's like, this is a real thing, guys. People do it today. What's the difference between a witchcraft or a witch, a warlock, a sorcerer, a necromancer, and a prophet or a seer of Israel? What's the difference then?
Prophet is always true.
Okay, it's always true. Sure.
Isn't like the warlock like the highest?
Well, I guess I'm just saying functionally, this is pop quiz of everything we just talked about. What's the difference between witchcraft and being a prophet? Because best way I think about it is the directionality of it. The prophet is speaking words that are given to him by God directly, whereas a witch or a sorcerer is trying to conjure up power, right? So it's God's power coming down and bestowing, or trying to work your way up to a state of, power.
I don't need to beat a dead horse, but I really think that we need to take, like, humans feel so powerless over our world. Like, we just go in your news app, and it's so overwhelming. And we want, as humans, in our human condition, to make change, to have power, we are subject. We are not subject. We are susceptible to pulling this into our fate.
Yeah.
If we're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's a warning to us because we want that too. Like, we can stand here and be like, oh, the witches, oh, it's so bad.
Yeah.
We got to look in our own hearts though and say,
right.
Where do we try to affect power?
Absolutely.
And take power from God? And when are we humbling ourselves before God?
This connects to the story of David in the wilderness. Most of the prophets of the Bible will tell you that God meets you when you're in lack, when you're in need, right? That's when you start hearing from God. Whereas the way of the witch or the sorcerer is you add potions and mantras, and you do all these things to bring about a state of, you being in contact with power. Whereas in the Bible, the true prophet is the one who's in the wilderness, right? Who is the one who is in such a great lack that now God is meeting them. So again, summary statement. This is a great example. This story is a great example about the difference between true prophecy or a true prophet of God and then seeking after alternative means. Is if God has not spoken, he's not spoken. Nothing is going to change that, right? And again, God grants this moment to Saul to say, no, judgment is coming upon you, for sure. But it reminds, sorry, I won't go to this painting, but I will go back to, all the way back when Saul is deposed as king, Samuel says, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much in obedience? To obey is better than sacrifice. And then he says, rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance like the evil of idolatry. And that's going to be the last act of Saul before he dies, is he's actually going to go, he's actually going to go so low as to go consult a witch, a necromancer. I love this painting only because, well, surely it's beautiful, but they all look like they belonged in the 12th century, or the 14th century. It's so funny, right? But yeah, the suicide of Saul. There's Saul fallen on his sword there with his armor bearer. Dang it. Yeah, in the neck of all places. I mean, come on. And look at, they all look like medieval knights. It's so funny. But yeah, it's a beautiful painting. So just to close the loop on Saul. Saul's a goner now, guys. And David did not do it, and David will even honor him in death, right? So the beginning of 2 Samuel begins with David singing a mourning song, a song of lament for Saul, for his friend Jonathan and Saul, right? Oh, poor Jonathan.
Sin
Yeah.
for us to take our own lives.
Sorry?
Is it a sin for us?
You could. Oh man, do we want to get into this discussion? This is a whole discussion. Sin as being defined as that which is not what God would have for you, then for sure, right? God would not.
Maybe the bigger question is in unforgiveness. So
Yeah, that would be if that's the question you're asking, that's a huge topic. Next time we will explore David's greatest years as king. Now he'll be king for real, and he will establish Jerusalem. He will establish Jerusalem and is granted a promise by God that his kingdom will reign until today, guys. Sound good? And into eternity. Sound good? Yeah. All right. Next time we will meet next week. So Merry Christmas. And see you guys next week.